Rome destroyed entire civilizations, but there was one king it could never break, neither in life nor in death. They trained the enemy, armed the enemy, and then went on to die at the enemy's hands. A king without an army, without a kingdom, and without a way out, and still he was the one who won. The greatest army in history was brought to a standstill, not by a battle, but by a man who simply chose to die. And Rome walked away from that moment carrying something no victory had ever been able to heal. There was a war behind that war, silent, invisible, fought not with swords, but with patience, betrayal, and a knowledge Rome should never have handed over. And in the end, in a clearing in the mountains of Dacia, everything converged into a single moment. A moment Roman soldiers could never describe, that generals never wanted to record, and that Rome buried deep, because admitting what happened there would mean admitting something no empire dares to face. Picture this: soldiers who had fought across 3 continents, who had seen everything, and suddenly they stop, completely. Not because someone ordered them to, not because they were afraid to die, but because they saw something they had never seen before, something they simply could not process. Right there in front of them, the king of Dacia, Decebalus, took his own life before any Roman could get close, calm, deliberate, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And these were not ordinary soldiers, they were veterans, men who woke up every day ready for war, who had normalized chaos the way we normalize traffic. But the death of Decebalus was unlike anything they had ever faced. It wasn't desperation, it wasn't escape, it was a choice, cold, conscious, and final. And that struck deep, not in the body, but in the mind, in a place no military training in the world knows how to protect. What few people realize is that this moment did not come out of nowhere. It was the result of years of war, pride, mistakes, and an arrogance Rome had been accumulating without even noticing. To understand why the greatest army of the ancient world was paralyzed by a single man, you first need to understand how Rome got there believing it was invincible. Rome did not rise to the top by accident. For centuries, it built a war machine so efficient, so tested, and so lethal that no one in the known world dared to challenge it head-on. Roman equipment was standardized, heavy and brutal, and at the center of it all was the scutum, that massive curved shield that protected a legionary from neck to knees. For the Roman soldier, carrying that shield was almost a matter of faith. He didn't question it. He trusted it, because it had always worked. And that is exactly where the danger lies. When something works for too long, people stop questioning whether it still works. Roman generals stopped innovating not because they were incompetent, they were brilliant. They stopped because they were never forced to change. No enemy had ever come close enough to demand real adaptation. And so, without realizing it, Rome began to trade flexibility for certainty. It started confusing tradition with superiority. It fell asleep inside a confidence that, deep down, was a trap waiting for the right moment to close. This rigidity didn't show up in the speeches of emperors or in the reports of generals. It was in the small things, in the way soldiers were trained, in the equipment passed down from generation to generation without revision, in the silent arrogance of those who had never needed to reinvent themselves. Rome had stopped evolving without even noticing, and on the other side of the Danube, there was someone who knew exactly how to use that information. The Dacians were not strategyless savages. They had a weapon, and it was designed with a single purpose: to destroy exactly what Rome considered indestructible. The Falx was a long, curved blade, sharpened on both sides, with a reach no legionary was used to facing. It didn't try to break the shield, it simply went over it, around it, under it, and reached the soldier's body in places Roman armor had never needed to protect before. And what happened on the front lines was something Roman records can barely describe without sounding like an excuse. Veteran Roman legionaries, men who had endured brutal wars and walked away, panicked. Not the panic of facing a larger force, but the panic of not understanding what was happening. The wounds were different, precise, deep, striking places that were supposed to be untouchable. And suddenly that armor which symbolized power began to feel insufficient. Rome did something few empires would dare to do in the middle of a war. It admitted it was wrong, and it rushed to adapt. That is how the Monica was born, an additional arm guard hastily developed to counter a threat that should not have existed. Rome won that battle, but the Falx had already proven something far more dangerous than any wound. It proved that the Roman army could be caught off guard. And there was a man on the other side who knew exactly how to use that information. After the First War in 102 AD, Rome imposed a humiliating treaty on Decebalus. He was required to reduce his army, surrender his war machines, and accept the presence of Roman engineers in Dacian territory. For any other king, that would have been the end, a surrender disguised as peace. But Decebalus remained silent, lowered his head before the Roman envoys, and accepted every condition without hesitation, and Rome interpreted that as submission. It was the greatest mistake the empire ever made. Because Decebalus was not surrendering, he was studying. Every Roman engineer who entered Dacia was, in practice, a teacher. Every construction technique, every method of fortification, every secret of military logistics that Rome brought with it was absorbed, analyzed, and adapted. Decebalus observed everything with a patience that bordered on unsettling. He knew he could not defeat Rome in open battle, so he decided to learn how to think like Rome, so he could later use that knowledge against it. What followed in the years ahead was silent, invisible, and devastating. Dacian fortresses were rebuilt using Roman techniques. Defenses were reorganized according to the same principles Rome used to protect its own frontiers. And while all of this was happening, Rome celebrated its victory, carved its triumphs into stone, and believed that Dacia had been subdued. But the peace Rome saw was, in reality, the most dangerous phase of the entire war, because the enemy was still standing, and now he knew too much. Between 102 and 105 AD, Dacia was officially at peace with Rome. On paper, everything was settled. The treaty had been signed, the conditions were being fulfilled, and the empire could sleep peacefully. But while Rome slept, Decebalus worked. He used every resource the treaty allowed, every connection the Roman engineers opened, every piece of knowledge he had absorbed, and turned all of it into preparation for war. This was not rebellion, it was surgery. What makes this story so fascinating is Decebalus's cold precision. He did not act out of anger, nor did he make decisions in the heat of the moment. He waited. He observed Rome up close, understood its patterns, identified its blind spots, and built his response brick by brick. He transformed his own civilization during those years, reorganizing alliances, rearming his people, and constructing defenses that would make any Roman general hesitate before attacking. All of this using the time Rome had generously given him. In 105 AD, Decebalus broke the treaty and struck Roman territories no one expected to be threatened. And the shock in Rome was not only military, it was psychological, because the empire realized too late that it had not defeated an enemy in the First War, It had created one. It had provided the tools, the knowledge, and the time necessary for Dacia to become something entirely different from what it had been before. This time, Rome would not face a desperate people, it would face a reflection of itself. Rome was not the kind of empire to take a slap and remain silent. When news of Decebalus's betrayal reached Trajan, the response was immediate, colossal, and cold as stone. The emperor mobilized around 150,000 men, one of the largest armies ever assembled in Roman history, and marched toward Dacia with a determination that went beyond military strategy. Trajan did not just want to win, he wanted to erase. He wanted Dacia to cease to exist as a threat, as a symbol, as a memory. And to make it clear that this time there was no turning back, Trajan ordered the construction of a bridge over the Danube River, a structure of stone and wood stretching more than a kilometer, built in wartime over one of the widest rivers in Europe. This was not just engineering, it was a message. Rome was not passing through. Rome was arriving to stay, and the Danube would no longer be a frontier, it would become a corridor. The siege that followed was planned like an equation with no unknown variables. Rome cut off supply routes, isolated Dacian allies, and advanced methodically toward the capital, Sarmizegetusa. Every move was calculated, every decision cold and precise. From a military standpoint, victory was practically guaranteed even before the final confrontation. But there was one thing Trajan, with all his strategic brilliance, had not accounted for: the personal decision of a king who preferred death over anything Rome could offer. Sarmizegetusa was the jewel of Dacia, the capital, the heart, the symbol of everything Decebalus had built. And Rome surrounded it with a precision that left no room for hope. Supplies were cut off, escape routes were blocked, Dacian allies were neutralized one by one. Rome turned that war into a problem of mathematics, and in Roman mathematics, the answer was always the same. The fortress could resist for days, weeks, perhaps a few months, but fall, it would fall. Everyone knew it, including Decebalus. And that is precisely why, before the end, the king gathered his nobles, not to plan a surrender, not to negotiate terms, but to decide what should survive after everything was over, which knowledge to preserve, which traditions to protect, what to hide from the Romans so that Dacia would not die completely alongside its capital. It was a council of men who knew they were living through the final days of a world, trying to save at least a spark of it. There was a dignity in that which Rome, absorbed in its military calculations, was not prepared to recognize. When Sarmizegetusa finally fell, Decebalus was not there. He had fled to the mountains, taking with him a handful of men and the certainty that Rome would come after him. And Rome did. The pursuit was intense, determined, and relentless because Trajan knew that as long as Decebalus lived, Dacia would never be fully defeated. The soldiers pushed through the mountains, tightening the net step by step, until, in a silent clearing, the chase came to an end in a way no one had imagined. When the Roman soldiers finally found Decebalus, he had already made his decision. Without hesitation, without pleading, without any gesture of surrender, the king of Dacia took his own life before any Roman hand could touch him. And the legionaries who stood there, hardened men, experienced, accustomed to the brutality of war, simply stopped. There was no order to halt, no visible threat, only a heavy, unfamiliar silence that none of them knew how to break. Because what they had just witnessed was not a defeat, it was a statement. Rome did what Rome always did with its defeated enemies. It displayed Decebalus's head as a trophy, carved its victory into stone, and celebrated the triumph with the grandeur the empire executed better than anyone. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Dacia was conquered, its gold was in Roman coffers, and its king was dead. Absolute victory, beyond dispute. But inside every soldier who stood in that clearing, there was something the parades and celebrations could not erase. An image, a moment, a man who chose his own terms until the very end. And this is where the story reveals its deepest layer. Rome conquered territories, wealth, and power, as it always did. But on that day, without realizing it, it discovered something its strategy manuals had never mentioned. There are enemies who cannot be dominated by force, who can be defeated militarily and still emerge victorious in a way no sword, no legion, and no emperor could prevent. Decebalus lost the war, but he denied Rome the one thing the empire truly needed: total submission. And that, curiously, is the kind of thing that lingers in memory long after trophies turn to dust. And so, after all of this, one question refuses to go away. Did Rome truly win? It conquered territories, took the gold, displayed the trophy, but the one man it most wanted to dominate escaped in a way no sword, no legion, and no emperor could prevent. Decebalus denied Rome the one thing the empire truly needed: total submission. And that changes everything about what it means to win a war. Think about it for a moment. For centuries, Rome believed that force was enough, that having the largest army, the best armor, and the sharpest strategy guaranteed victory over anything. And then came a king who studied Rome better than Rome studied itself, used the enemy's own knowledge against it, and in the final moment chose his own terms. Which of the two civilizations in the end demonstrated greater intelligence in this story? And speaking of intelligence, did you know that the Dacian Falx was so devastating that it forced Rome to redesign its armor in the middle of a war? An empire that hadn't changed in 500 years, forced to adapt in haste because of a single weapon. What else did Rome hide between the lines of its official history? What other battles, kings, and secrets were buried beneath the version the empire wanted the world to believe? Leave in the comments what you found most impressive about this story, and tell me, do you think Decebalus won or lost? If you made it this far, you're not an ordinary viewer. You're part of a legion that refuses to let the history of Rome die. Most people who watch this channel still aren't subscribed. If this story gave you something, you already know what to do. Click the red button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the more this legion grows, the deeper we can go into the dark and forgotten stories that no one else dares to tell.